Hello and welcome. This is Brian Robson, the Medical Director at Healthcare Improvement Scotland, and welcome to this, the 11th and final in our exciting lineup of QI Connect WebEx sessions in 2016, the 30th session since we began. Now remember, QI Connect provides an opportunity for colleagues across health and social care and beyond to learn from international leaders in the field of improvement, innovation and integration. And we've designed these sessions to be short, accessible and recorded to allow access at a time that suits you. And to do that, we use the wonderful medium of WebEx, and I'm going to hand you over now to Jennifer to explain a little bit more about the WebEx. Good evening, Jennifer.
Thank you, Brian, and good evening everyone who's on the session today. I'm just going to take you through a couple of just quick housekeeping slides, because I know you're all keen to get to the main content of today's session. So if you could just please use the chat function that you see on the right hand side of your screen to communicate, and you'll see the speech bubble icon there. I'll talk you through that in just a moment. If you are having any technical difficulties, such as not being able to hear the presenter speak, or if you keep losing connection, please message the event manager using the chat function or by pressing *0 on your telephone keypad. So we do want these sessions to be fun and interactive, and encourage you to use the chat function to share any questions, comments or ideas through the talk. If you just click on that icon, you can see circled in red there. And we'll also be sharing hyperlinks within the chat function to any resources mentioned by our speakers today. So I'm now going to hand you back over to Brian, who's just going to tell you a little bit more, looking back over our 2016 series. So I'll just hand it over.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. As you can see, many of the regular QI connectors are on the call. Today you'll recognise many of these faces. These were our wonderful QI Connect speakers for 2016. I won't run through them all, but you'll all recall the wonderful kick-off to the year that Don Berwick gave back at the beginning of the year. But all the wonderful speakers have contributed, and as have the QI connectors, and we now have almost 500 organisations from all over the globe that join and use the QI Connect resource, and you're all very, very welcome indeed. And you know, our reach now goes to 48 countries, and on tonight's call we have folks from New Zealand to Canada, from the north of Sweden, north of Norway, all the way down to Spain and France. So we welcome to you all. It's absolutely super to have you joining QI Connect. And remember, all of our sessions are recorded and freely available on the Healthcare Improvement Scotland website, and we know that many of our colleagues in universities and quality improvement courses use these resources on a daily basis, so you're welcome to use them. And just a big shout out to the small but perfectly formed QI Connect team. You've heard from Jennifer. We also have Ross Stewart in the studio with me today. Ross deals with all the certification before and after and all of the administration during the call. Thank you very much, Ross. And wonderful Alex Sterling, who's helping us spread our reach via Twitter. So those of you that are following us on Twitter, please tweet away today. And you'll be aware that tonight, it's now 7 p.m. here in Glasgow, but tonight is a very different QI Connect, and we are trying to squeeze as much as possible in to the remainder of this hour. And we have three wonderful design students from schools across Scotland. We have three leaders in design from across Scotland, and we have Tim Brown, the Chief Executive of the global design company IDEO, on the call, and you'll hear from all of them in the next few minutes. But please don't forget to chat. We see great chat already, people saying hello to each other. And also, thanks Graham McKenzie for reminding me that Twitter has a lot to offer in terms of asking questions and making comments. So we'll have Alex and also Jennifer watching Twitter as we go through today's session. So we're still going to have time to put a couple of questions to folks on the panel and the students later on in the call. So please chat and tweet away, and we'll keep an eye out for your correspondence. However, let me introduce the very first of our leaders in healthcare design. We have Dr. Rodney Mountain, who is an ENT surgeon up in Dundee, and also Associate Postgraduate Dean at the Duncan Jordanstone College of Art and Design in Dundee. Good afternoon, good evening, Rodney.
Thanks very much for the introduction, Brian. And I don't really consider myself a real leader. I'm a learner. I've been learning a lot in the last 5 years. It's great to see so many design students and past and present signing up tonight, and some medical colleagues that are getting involved, because I think this is just a great opportunity to bring the creative sector and healthcare together. There's so much we can do together. I thought I'd share 3 what I consider fantastic disruptive ideas that are occurring in Scotland at the moment, and particularly in our world in Dundee. We have this great future ahead in Dundee, being the V&A Museum of Design that will be opening in 2018, and really a history in Dundee that has been brought forward through the creative economy in our city. Duncan of Jordanstone, just a fantastic College of Art and Design that is leading the way, and leading the way in the work done in so many different sectors of society. We have a design festival now that has started this year and will run next year. There's really a feel in the city that something is happening, and it's all come through the creative sector. I work for the Academic Health Science Partnership in Tayside, which again is a great idea. This is the first partnership in Scotland where the university and the NHS work together. And it's just a great way to get out of our silos and do things together creatively. And in a short space of time, we've only been running for 1.5 years, we've achieved a lot by trying to break down the old model of a university and an NHS and looking at something new and a different way to tackle our challenges. I've been on a really interesting personal journey, and took myself off to the art college about 5 years ago, integrated with the art students, and then more recently with the design students. And I've learnt a whole new language, a whole new range of tools to use, a whole lot of things that any of us from the healthcare sector can actually use in a very effective manner in our day-to-day lives. I embarrassed myself, and I tell the story quite often, meeting up with Mike Press, who's a lead in service design, and he posed the question, what do you do with the sort of challenges of too many patients, not enough money, and limited resources in the NHS? And I challenge any of you to see what your response would be. Mine was a traditional medical one of saying, well, we'll get a few managers together and some of our nursing colleagues, and we'll sort of rejig the jigsaw puzzle. And there was this long pause, and he came back with the response, Rod, who are your users? And I think this is just key to the way a designer thinks, and bringing people that are using your service right into the discussion in everything you do, right from the start. Using tools that are very empathic and engaging, getting into the shoes of people and hearing from them, and then redesigning your service. It's all about participation, it's all about communication, it's all the sort of things we should be doing in the health service. We're making a start in Dundee. We're doing a lot with mixing up the med students and design students. We've got a master's in healthcare design being developed. And we're really just trying to promote the value of service design and design thinking. I've just brought Tim Brown's Change by Design book along with me today, and I think everybody should read it. It's the core to a change in thinking that we need to all take on board. One of my colleagues in the art college, Graham Pullen, describes a great idea. You need to create a clash between left and right brain thinking about objective ways of thinking and subjective ways of thinking, and then real exciting things come forward. So I put it to you, I think we all can be designers, and no matter what background, we can learn the skills, we can learn from our design colleagues, and we must really look at this future to do this together. Thanks so much.
Rodney, thank you so much, and thanks for those wise words. And let's move on to our next leader and learner in design. And we've got Don McIntyre. Don is the design director at the Glasgow School of Art. Good evening, Don.
Good evening, Brian, and again, thank you for the introduction. This is indeed going to be almost the battle of the Scottish cities. I hope that hope the audience can understand us. I've got the first slide up here, partly in jest, but there's an underlying serious tone in that I was presenting recently in Singapore, and no one seemed to know what iron brew was, but they certainly know what it is in Scotland. And the point, I guess, of this slide is that in Scotland we have, regardless of the fact that we are in many ways have a deep-rooted and real integrity with respect to education and knowledge and medicine, we still have real issues with respect to social care and healthcare. There is, I think, and Brian, you'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong, there's at least a 12 to 15-year difference in the life expectancy of someone in the south of England and someone in Glasgow. So that is not, it hasn't got anything to do necessarily with social class. It's something to do with the way we lead our lives. And design is very well placed to address those issues. And at Glasgow School of Art, within the Institute of Design Innovation at Glasgow School of Art, we were involved and we were integral to the setup and creation of the Digital Health and Care Institute, where we use design as the engine of innovation, where we create a safe space, and it's similar to what my colleague mentioned there, but bringing extreme collaborators together to address some of these issues that are at the core of the issues we have in Scotland with healthcare. So if I could ask you to just go to the next slide. Great, okay. I apologise for putting a diagram up, but I think this is worth seeing because Scotland has been, we are an innovative nation, I would say that, but I really think we are, and what the opportunity that we have in Scotland is that the route to success and the route to innovation is relatively short. We only have 5.2 million people here, so we have no excuse not to make a change and not to try and make a change in using design. So there's a three-tier approach we take in the DHI. We unfortunately call this the hamburger model, which within the confines of DHI probably isn't that wise. However, what we do is we start off by looking at the problem. We call that exploratory stage, where we take a stand and we address and we investigate the extent to which there's other knowledge available about a given issue or problem, be it stroke rehabilitation, diabetes, cardiac issues. We move from there into my team, which is the Experience Lab team, where we use design to really prosecute the extent to which we have the right problem. So one of the challenges of the design is use of critical thinking to deconstruct a set of preconceptions as to what a solution should be. And then we move from that into an environment where we exploit the idea, we make the idea, and we give it life and tangibility. And in doing so, there's a real legitimacy and integrity to what we result at in that stage, because it's born of real academic research, it has business integrity, and it has the mechanism through civic life for deployment into society. And we've had a great deal of success over the last 3 years. We've worked with a raft of different academic institutions, created a raft of innovation, and it's about that, if you like, the holy trinity of academic, business, and civic combination. Design is very good at making tangible the intangible. It's very good at simplifying complexity. And this is all tied into the Institute of Design Innovation's notion of creating a preferable future rather than a probable future. So a future that we can help shape rather than sleepwalk into. So that was a whistle-stop tour of 3 years' work, and I hope that Struan, although he wasn't involved in the Institute of Design Innovation, I think what he's come up with is really innovative in terms of design's application in healthcare.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Don, for that, and we'll hear from Struan just shortly. And the third in our lineup of leaders and learners in design, we have Arno Verhoeven, who is the Programme Director and Postgraduate Product Design in Edinburgh and a member of the Council for the Research Society. And I apologise for mispronouncing your name, Arno. Good evening.
Good evening. How is everyone?
Very good, thanks.
Tough act to follow. I think both Rodney and Don have articulated very well what design is in Dundee and what design is in Glasgow. I think following on Don's point, Scotland is an incredibly rich and diverse country with a small population, and oddly, there's a lot of space for innovation with 4 art and design colleges, a whole host of universities, a fantastic landscape, and actually trying to consider what is it that makes, I think, Scotland unique and interesting is the fact that there are these 4 kind of hubs of innovation and design and excitement, and Edinburgh being one of them. I think we've gone in the last 5 years through a particular change that's really started to shape our involvement in the community, particularly the academic community, with a merger with a research powerhouse like the University of Edinburgh. But that's also started to shape a discourse around what design is and what design can do. In the past 5 years, we've had an opportunity to start to work with colleagues and introduce design and design thinking and design processes to places that are substantially research powerhouses like the School of Medicine, the School of Business, the School of Anthropology, and all of these areas that I suppose work not on the fringes of design, but work, I think, in quite strong tandem. We've had the opportunity to explore humanitarian aid and the impact that design can have on displaced populations. We've had the opportunity to look at new business models in partnership with the School of Business. We're looking at design and dementia and the impact that it can have on helping to bring meaning to people's lives who are struggling and living with dementia. But at the heart of what we do, aside from having all these fantastic opportunities, is we really love to make things, to design things, and to challenge what the existing state of the world is, and as Don has said, to look towards preferable futures, to understand how we can make a difference. So we've got a variety of approaches to things. We don't have a particular set approach. We encourage students to come with an open mind, to come with an open heart, and to try and understand and explore what they're passionate about, often drawing from personal and real-life experiences, and then engaging with the community within Edinburgh, if wider if possible, but also with the academic community and the expert community. We've started to forge strong relationships with the NHS Lothian team, Graham Cumming, Simon Watson, Alison McCallum, to understand that design has an impact in health as well, much like what is happening in Dundee and also happening over in Glasgow. I think what makes us somewhat special and unique is that open-ended nature and the opportunity for us to not necessarily be an independent discipline, but to be at the heart of a variety of disciplines, to actually be a broker for true interdisciplinary environments. So one of the strengths that we've had to focus on and to develop is a sense of listening to our end users and our colleagues who are our clients, but also listen to our colleagues who bring in particular expertise that, for all the will and good nature of the world, designers aren't experts of everything. So having to build strong collaborations and working in partnership with people who are experts, who understand their problems quite intimately, and looking for us for perhaps innovative solutions, innovative perspectives, and new ways of approaching the problem spaces that they bring, is something that I think makes design at Edinburgh, it's an exciting time right now.
Arno, thank you so much. And Simon Watson's on the call, Brian Houston, the chairman of NHS Lothian's on the QI Connect tonight, and they've all talked very positively and encouragingly about the collaboration that you're setting up over there. So welcome to QI Connect. And now the fourth and final of our leaders and learners in design, delighted to have with us the Chief Executive of IDEO, Mr. Tim Brown. Good afternoon, Tim.
Many thanks. It's great to join you all, and it's hard to follow the smart, thoughtful, considered comments that have gone before me. So I'll be quick and say a little bit about perhaps the experiences that we've had over the last couple of decades as we've gone on our journey of perhaps understanding the evolving role of design. And I would say there's really sort of many things one could talk about. A couple that I think are important, particularly with regard to this particular question of how might design most positively impact healthcare. And one of the things that we discovered early on, and which I've probably spent a career thinking about now, is design's not only for designers, and that one of the fundamental sort of reasons that we've had whatever success I think we've had in tackling interesting problems has been because we quite early discovered that there are many people that one can bring into a design environment and have them be extremely impactful. And so, if you happen to take a trip across the Atlantic and come visit us in California, you'd find I'm sat. I look outside the room that I'm sat in right now, and where a big part of our healthcare team is based, and I can see designers, and I can see engineers, I can see social scientists, I can also see practicing physicians. We have neuroscientists on staff. We have surgeons on staff, and we've just seen that design is a place where people with many disciplines can come and participate in the problem-solving process. And I think that where I've seen the most impact in work we've done in healthcare, it's where I've seen nurses and physicians and patients and administrators being deeply involved in a kind of co-creative, collaborative process for improving the way in which we think about healthcare. And so it sounds to me like that's exactly what is going on in Scotland today, which is very exciting. And then I would say the second lesson that we've learned, and it's been an enduring question for me in my time as a designer. I find myself really consistently only asking one question, which is what can design do next? And I think today we're at a point where so many of the systems of life, if you want to describe it that way, were designed for a context and a situation that's now 150 years ago, and that so many of these systems of life need fundamental redesign. Healthcare is one of those. We need to find new ways of reaching people. We need to, as has already been mentioned, we need to find ways of health being meaningful before we're sick rather than after we're sick. We need to find ways of bringing healthcare to parts of the world which have still not yet had real access to it. So the scale of the problems that we are challenged with has never been greater, and hence the opportunity for design to play a role never been greater. But we need to be thoughtful about the kinds of problems we pick off. And I don't know, but I think there might be another slide or so. Maybe you could advance to the next slide. I'm not sure if there is another one. So I talked about people. Maybe go to the next one. Sorry. And then. Could go to the next slide. That's great. And I think we need to be thoughtful about the kinds of both the complexities of the challenges that we're taking on, but also understand the differences between what it takes to design products versus services, ultimately versus systems, and the kinds of tools that we need to use. Each is not identical to the next, and I think it's important that we. As we consider, I think one of the earlier speakers talked about problem spaces. As we consider more complex problem spaces, we also need to get more sophisticated about the kinds of tools that we use in order to support design and support our exploration processes. But I don't think there's ever been a moment where design doesn't have more potential for impact than it does today. So thank you.
Tim, thank you so much. That's great, and thank you all for your contributions. So let's move on. We've got the rest of the session, and what we're going to be hearing from, who we're going to be hearing from now are next three design students. Absolutely delighted to have our students, or newly graduated students, and the first one up we're going to be coming to just in a moment. And what we've posed for the students is we've asked them to tell us a little bit about a problem, the context that problem is embedded in, a little bit about the approach that they took in trying to address the problem, a little bit about the challenges, and a little bit about their solutions. And we asked them to do all of that in 5 minutes. So First up, we've got Angie Brown. Angie, welcome to the call. Angie's a postgraduate from Dundee and now an interior designer. Good evening, Angie.
Hello. So I'll just talk to you briefly about my honours project that I completed in the first half of this year. I was lucky enough to collaborate with the medical school in Dundee for my project and help them redesign and reimagine their clinical skills centre, which at the moment is quite an uninspiring environment, which doesn't really encourage the users to stay later after class. They kind of flee the scene after they're done. And it doesn't reflect the state-of-the-art technology and teaching that goes on in the skills rooms that surround it at the moment. Sorry, if you go on to the next slide, and then the next one. Okay, so to put it more into context for you, for those of you that aren't familiar with a medical school, a clinical skills centre is somewhere that students go to learn examination and consultation techniques for their professional and future careers in a controlled and supervised environment. It's got a range of different users that go there, so it's not just the students or the staff or medical professionals. There's also members of the public who go there to act as stimulated patients in the place of real patients. And so how this came about was we were approached in the art school by the director of the centre, Ben Shiffey, who was looking for a bit more life to be injected into the place and to try and make a more informal environment where people could stay later, they could chat about sessions and maybe even just meet for coffee there, and a place where staff could become more approachable. Sorry, next slide. So how I went about doing this was, as it was a live brief, I thought the best solution would be to have a co-design approach in which the users of the space could collaborate with me at every single stage of the design process, and they could have their input and have their say. Because I'm not from a medical background personally, so obviously I don't know all their needs, so the best way is to work with them. So how I did this was by hosting a series of mini workshops, and for inspiration for these things I actually looked at the IDEO method cards, which were great, and other things like the service design toolkit, as well as attending the Global Service Jam in Dundee, which gave me a lot of inspiration about what kind of activities I could use with the participants to try and get them thinking in a creative way. And I hosted these in various locations throughout Dundee, not just in their normal working or teaching environments, to try and get everyone out of their normal space and in a new environment. The activities, I tried to get the participants to sort of share and interact with each other about their own personal experiences and how their needs are different and how we could solve them all together. Different things I got them to do were things like creating conceptual models with tools and materials that I gave them, to not make a really pretty final model, but to try and visualize how they want their new experience to feel in the space, like how they want it to flow, and not focus too much about the end result, but to instead think about how things fit together and why they do. Sorry, next slide. So challenges. There were a lot of challenges in this project, as with any honours project, I'm sure. But aside from more obvious ones, such as like a budget or like structural constraints and things like that, I'd say the most challenging thing was how to, first of all, bring people together who normally don't see each other out with a classroom or a professional environment, and how to get them thinking in a creative way, especially if they're from a non-design background, or if they wouldn't think of themselves as creative thinkers necessarily, and how to give them the encouragement to realise that their ideas are so valuable, and their knowledge mixed with some of the design knowledge that I have could make the perfect solution, instead of just giving it to a designer to go off and make something in their studio and come back and present ideas. So that was challenging. However, I think by taking everyone out of their normal working environments and putting them in a space together meant that there was no sort of hierarchy, and I wasn't really acting as their teacher. I was more the facilitator in that environment, which really helped everyone feel sort of secure in sharing their ideas, and that there wasn't a silly idea or there wasn't a wrong answer, which was great. Sorry, next slide. So using all the information I found at these workshops, I took that back and started translating it into a more 3D physical space by applying my own design experience and knowledge. Sort of inspiration, I looked at other learning environments and workplaces that try and do that as well for some inspiration and how to make a more social environment. So to conclude, the final design focused on three main values, which was transparency, flow and flexibility, which hopefully will create a more seamless and enjoyable experience for all the users of the space, and also give the centre a real identity within the medical school and not just make it a forgotten space that people have to go to class. I wanted to give it a proper identity so people want to go there. And if you want to find any more information out on that, I also have a blog online, so there's a video and things about it if you are interested. Thank you for listening.
Wonderful, Angie. Absolutely brilliant. And we'll tweet and put in the chat box your blog if we can get that detail through the call. A wonderful description, nice problem, nicely described. Maybe we could go to Tim and ask Tim, any comments or thoughts on Angie's approach?
Great project, and something that I can see having a ton of impact. I was wondering, did you find ways that you felt you were able to prototype some of the connection between the kind of design expressions and the values that you were talking about, things like this idea of transparency, for instance? I mean, were you able to find opportunities to prototype some of those ideas before you got to the final design?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most rewarding workshop that I did was when I got everyone together to build physical models, because by giving them the materials, it's kind of like Lego, I suppose, where, you know, they can't actually make anything too detailed. It has to be with these sort of symbolic blocks to represent what it is they want and what it is they want it to feel like. So I think that was most rewarding because everyone kind of listened up, and even the discussions that were had throughout them making were invaluable because people started talking about things they wouldn't normally and throwing out new ideas. And I was left with the physical model at the end, which meant that it wasn't as though these discussions had got lost. We had these models that represented their ideas, which I think was great.
Yeah, so you talked about the challenge of working with non-designers and having them be creative, and my experience is that it's as you get people to be involved in somehow creating, making, being part of the making of solutions, testing them out, trying them out, that they quite quickly forget that they don't think of themselves as creative, and they just start exploring and interacting and giving you their opinion and thinking for themselves. So I think prototyping is a great way of doing that. And with space, that's hard because you need to build things that are really big. But the more you can do it, the better.
Definitely, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Tim. We've got Valerie Panunzio, who's the service designer for Philips, who's based in Holland, who's just made a comment, Angie, to say that reminds her very much of the MIT Student Centre, where she described the learning environment you want to stay in. So it sounds as though this is a global question. How do you keep students where they want to learn? Wonderful. Can I ask, we can take one more question from one other of the panelists. Would one of the other panelists want to put a question to Angie? And you might be on mute, so if you press *6 and come off mute.
I could go, Brian. Excuse me if you'd like.
Thanks, Don.
Angie, first of all, I thought it was great, and I really liked, in particular, I thought your visuals were beautiful, and I think that really helps to convey some of the emotional aspects of what you're trying to do. It's always a challenge, I think, when moving from a workshop situation into that convergent thought process that design demands of us in terms of translating some of that, the more abstract thought, into something which is actually decision-making. What approach did you take, Angie, to moving from that kind of discussion, that discussion which is fruitful, can be tremendously beneficial, particularly when it's cooperative like that? How did you make decisions about what eventually ended up on the page? What kind of techniques did you have as a designer to push that through?
I think the most important thing that I did was instead of just waiting till all the workshops were done and then going away and trying to design something, after every single session or workshop or meeting that I had, I would then do things like sketching or make models or research into ideas that they've maybe touched on and present that to them in the next session and develop from there. Instead of having sort of clear goals for each session, it would kind of flow naturally. So I would adapt it after each time, and I think that was the best way to translate it all, was to kind of see where it took me while doing it as I went, really. But so yeah, I think that what worked best was not leaving it all to the end and just doing it throughout.
Okay,
brilliant.
Thanks, Angie. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Angie, round of applause, Ross.
Good
job. Angie, that was absolutely super, and I see that Graham McKenzie, a consultant public health medicine from NHS Lothian, has already put your the link to your display on the chat box and also on Twitter. So thanks very much, Graham. Now we'll come back to the next student. We have Struan Wood. Good evening, Struan, from the Glasgow School of Art.
Hi there, everybody.
Hi.
Now, one quick caveat I have to say is I graduated a year ago, so this is me managing to get my project out of the cupboard, as it were, so I'm actually a graduate, but this was my final year project.
Brilliant.
So I guess I'll start talking to you about it. Next slide, please. So as I said, it was my self-initiated project, and I can genuinely say I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do my project on. And I had a great belief in design and that it could solve problems when they were not only uncover them, but then solve them. And while this might make me sound rather callous, my grandfather, in the middle of the picture on the right there, had a stroke and had a second stroke as well. And I sort of saw this as an opportunity. I was like, well, I have access here, as it were, to research, and I wanted to really understand what he'd gone through and work out a way that I could improve the journey, as I believe that design could for anything. So if we jump to the next slide. So the context, I took this sort of guiding in terms of what the presentational scope I was to sort of explore the context of what strokes were in Scotland. And so for me, to help my understanding, I literally mapped out the entire journey for someone who's suffered from a stroke, right from the point of having a stroke, all the way through all their touch points, all the way through the processes within the NHS, right through to their ongoing recovery. And I did this by holding interviews and workshops with as many medical staff and as many professionals I could get my hands on at this stage. And it really helped me identify that as a student and doing it as a student project, I had to hold my hands up and realize where I could intervene and where I couldn't. And because of the immediacy of the stroke and because of the way it acts, I realized that the steps between the stroke happening and then ultimately the medical care occurring to the patient, it was too sensitive for me to get involved in. However, the recovery process, which could last potentially from even down to days if it was a case of some of the rare strokes, all the way on to going for the rest of the life for some of the sufferers, I realized that that was a great opportunity to sort of look at and explore. So if we jump to the next slide, moving from sort of understanding the medical side, I really want to engage with as many users as I get my hands on. So as I said, the man on the left there, my grandfather, I hold interviews with him, all my family members, everyone who'd been involved with his care, including his carers who are professional carers. But I also had to realize that was fully subjective research. So I cast my net out to try and find as many people involved. And on the right, at the top, I managed to get in touch with the Stroke Improvement Team for Scotland, and I held a lot of interviews and workshops with them. And then underneath those were two photos with genuinely some of the best people you could ever hope for when you're doing research. This was a group who they were champions of self-management in care, which is exactly what I want to look at. And they were a group of people who'd had strokes themselves who met to try and discuss improvements with their stroke. So I really held as many interviews and grabbed as much time with these people as I could, and many copies were bought. And as we jump to the next slide, this actually really helped me uncover all the challenges in this area. I'm not going to tell people to suck eggs here, but as everybody knows about strokes, they're hugely unique. They can affect people in hugely different ways. And then also the people themselves they happen to are hugely unique. So trying to design a one one solution fits all idea was really challenging. Plus, design has that double-diamond approach and that problematic approach where you want to cast your net as wide as you can, use as much technology as you can, use as many interesting things as you can, and then sometimes you need to really pare that back and try and analyze what you wanted to do and what you want it to focus on. And for me, a huge part of this project, which was really interesting, was just uncovering the stories that everybody had to tell, from professionals to the families of people who'd had strokes, right down to the person themselves. I wanted to, some of the stories within there were beautiful, the tales of recovery, and I really wanted to try and bring that to the surface for others. So if we go to the next slide, this was my solution. Now, I'm not an app designer, so please don't throw too much critique at what it looks like, but I really want to talk about what it was. Now, Little Victories, as I called it, was a platform for sharing the stories of goal setting, of the setbacks to those goals, and also the successes amongst the community of people who'd had strokes who could really understand and relate. To put that in context, for someone who's had a stroke, moving a cup of coffee without spilling it on themselves could be something they've worked towards for 6 months. So I really wanted to create an environment where people would understand what that meant, rather than someone giving you a pat on the back because they don't know how much that meant to you. So that's what Little Victories was supposed to be for. And it's too small to read, but this story that's actually on the screen is actually a true story that I managed to sort of paraphrase into my idea to show the sort of proof of concept, which was very quickly a woman who wished to walk her daughter to the first day of school, and it was 800 yards or a bit further away, and she couldn't do it, and she was really struggling with the mental problem of not being able to walk her child to school, at which point another stroke survivor had suggested getting her dropped off just a little bit further than she'd ever achieved before from the school gates, which led to a beautiful story of her actually setting a personal best and being there at our first day of school. So yeah, that's Little Victories, and it's just that idea of really getting users to help other users, really without the needs for the NHS, and allowing people to sort of use themselves as a miniature society to improve life for each other. So that was Little Victories, and I hope you guys liked it.
Wonderful, Struan. Absolutely wonderful. What a great story. Super. Tim, what are your thoughts?
Well, I guess the thing that lots of good things about this project, not least taking on what is a significant challenge for so many sufferers, but it shows to me the power of personal motivation in design, right? I think we can, particularly when we talk about healthcare, quite appropriately, we have this need and desire to be as objective as we can be and somehow sort of remove ourselves from the problem a little bit. But my experience is that there are moments and occasions and projects where embarking on them because they have meaning to you personally can make all the difference. So it makes a difference in the way that you enter the project. It makes a difference in the way that you have empathy for the people that you're trying to serve as a designer, and it makes a difference in the ideas, in my opinion. And I think that's all evident from this project. So I think I would celebrate the fact that this is a project that's done with a high degree of kind of personal connection and personal motivation, and I'd love to see more of that in design for healthcare, to be honest with you.
Brilliant. There you go, Struan. That's really struck a chord, and you'll see from the chat box it's gone wild around the empathy and the connection with real people and your real experience. So really well done. Let's take another comment or question from one member of the panel. If you want to unmute yourself.
I've got a question for Struan.
Yep.
Arno.
Arno, sorry.
Fantastic project, very sensitively done. I think it's very emotive. One of the challenges that I know we face in Edinburgh, and you probably face in all areas, is this notion of ethics and working with vulnerable people. How important was it to get support working with people in this condition to avoid personal bias? I think you described at the beginning having a personal interest in whether or not that you were being objective, but also to make sure that you were being respectful at all times, considerate, and within a framework of ethics, and how the relationship between designing and ethics, and if you have any insights on that.
Yeah, it was a huge challenge for this project. For a long time, very early on, I found myself shackled almost by having to go through a lot of the paperwork, and rightly so it is there. I understand fully. I mean, personally, what I did a lot for this project was I thought of workarounds, just for pragmatic sake. So that Cosmic group were a charity support group who I managed to meet because they were technically out of care. And, you know, the personal experience, I mean, it threw up its own challenges when I deliberately separated my parents and sort of asked how involved the others were in the care of my grandfather, which was an unbelievably sensitive issue at the time. Personally, I think design has a responsibility to poke sometimes. It has a responsibility to ask questions which are a little bit close to the bone. I think ethics are hugely important. We need to be sensitive, but if we don't look underneath all the rocks, we're not going to find the ideas we're looking for sometimes. So I think it's a line that the designer themselves has to tread carefully, and they have to respect boundaries, and they have to put in place all that they can to make sure that if they're going over someone else's boundaries, that there are the systems in place, you know, the interview can be cancelled, everything can be withdrawn, and I was really upfront with all my participants about that. But yeah, I think ethics is something that we need to remember, but not let us shackle us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Arno, and a round of applause. Excellent, superb. We've got comments here from Kat McCauley, the Head of User Research and Service Design at the Scottish Government, and also comments from Graham McKenzie and others around values. And you've offered a great focus for thinking about the relationship between staff, user, and public, and involving the public in public service design. So really well done there, Struan. Thank you very much indeed. And now for our third speaker today, we have Katy Lobban from the University of Edinburgh. Good evening, Katy.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you very clearly, thanks. Welcome to QI Connect.
Thank you. Should I just get started, or?
Yeah, you can make a start. Do you want me to move the slide on?
Is that all right? Yes, thank you. Thanks.
Yep, there you go, you're all set.
Great. So my project centres around anxiety and depression. So next slide. Thank you. I've been looking into anxiety, and I've found that it's also the foundation for a lot of other mental illnesses such as depression, OCD, bulimia, and self-harming as well. And a lot of people suffer from it. Everyone will suffer from a mental illness at one point in their life anyway, and 1 in 6 young people are affected by anxiety. Now, what I found is that anxiety is largely propagated by loneliness, and counselling can be extremely important in helping with this. But especially I know within the NHS that in the past year, the amount of people being referred has increased by 20%. And within my university, the number of students being referred to the counselling service has doubled in the past 2 years. And this just can't really be met. The waiting times are at least 3 to 6 months. And long-term counselling is quite expensive. It's something that students can't really afford, but there are other ways around it. So what I've found from interviewing a lot of people who have experienced depression, OCD, anxiety, is that there's a consistent gap in support that they found quite difficult. So when they're undergoing counselling and they're speaking with a therapist in that safe environment, it seems easy to overcome the compulsions that they feel and to change their thinking patterns. But when they go home to their flatmates, their family, or maybe if they live by themselves, they feel like there's a lack of empathy there, and there's a lack of support, which makes it really difficult for them to get better and change the way that they think. So what I found is, though, that empathy plays a huge part in dissolving anxiety and other mental illnesses. And instead of having a person to show empathy, why couldn't we take technology, for example, and make that empathetic? I wonder if you could do that. So next slide. Thank you. So I've been looking into wearables. Now, wearables occupy very sensitive areas of the body, the wrist, the chest, but currently they don't take advantage of this position. They take the data and they display it in a digital format. But what would happen if they were to take that data through a sensor and through Bluetooth, they could activate a sensation and seek to affect the user in a positive way. Next slide. Thank you. So what I found is that sensory stimulation can be used to activate the temporal parietal junction, which is the area of the brain responsible for empathy. So this would mean that I could use color, touch, and heat to elicit empathy in a product and make someone feel better in a positive way. And their above quote there is that touch is our primary means of spreading compassion. Touch is extremely important in childhood and in adult life. And you can actually convey a lot of emotions through touch, more than can be said for things like other senses such as sound and sight. So next slide. Thank you. So on the right-hand side, I have some basic sketches. I didn't sketch too much on this, but basically I want my product to look like an organism, to be quite non-threatening and have the ability for people to empathize with it. So I think that it has to be quite simple, but again, I need to look into that more. But on the left-hand side of this slide, well, I'll explain the nervous system. So within the nervous system, there are two sides. So there's the sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the fight and flight response. This is what people feel when they're anxious. So their heart rate will rise, their muscles become more tense, and just a whole other range of symptoms that make people extremely stressed up. The other side of the nervous system is called the parasympathetic nervous system, and this is what mindfulness is centered around, and this reduces your heart rate to a steady pace. It relaxes the muscles, and this is what I would hope my product to target. Next slide. Thank you. So yeah, I found a lot of research. So the above quote says that touch stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which slows breathing and reduces heart rate. And all the other senses do this as well if done in the proper way. So by breathing deeply, by having warmth elicited throughout your body, by using particular colors, and by using different types of touch, you can reduce anxiety in people and make them more relaxed. So down here, I've got some images, but basically I want to make a wearable that can use pulse, light, and heat to reduce anxiety in people and hopefully help reduce mental illness. So that's it.
Absolutely wonderful, Katy. Thank you so much. Wow, empathetic technology and all the things that go behind that. Tim, what are your thoughts?
Boy, this is a challenging project, huh? I mean, I think it's a very interesting topic. I think it's an interesting hypothesis that you have. It feels to me that next step of beginning to gain some evidence, which is such an important part of the design process, right? I mean, design, like scientific experiment, is a constant cycles of hypothesis and then evidence seeking, and that evidence seeking comes through research, it comes through prototyping. And it feels to me that's what comes next, right? It's like, what are the simple things that you might be able to do, hacking existing devices, or even doing things with that don't use technology at all, but where you do experiments with what it means to touch somebody at certain moments in some way. I don't know what those experiments might be, but that's what I would look for. I would look for how can you begin to construct evidence that indeed that your hypothesis about the value of touch and stress actually actually plays out, and that then through multiple iterations you begin to get towards something that might actually be a piece of technology. But it's about going from the abstract, which you are today, to something that's ultimately concrete and realizable. But it's certainly a fascinating hypothesis that you have.
Thank you. Thanks.
Wonderful. And we've got Fiona Montgomery, Deputy Director at Scottish Government, saying, Katy, this is wow! Exclamation mark. And we've also got Kirsten Ward, QI consultant at Alberta Health Services in Canada, saying that she agrees that the the words empathetic technology don't normally happen in the same sentence. This is true design by innovation. So we've got time for one final question to Katy from the panel. And you may be on mute, panelists. And maybe not. So Katy, let me just...
Yeah, sorry, it's Rodney here.
Hi, Rodney, shoot.
Katy, I find this absolutely fascinating because I think empathy is key, really key to everything we do, particularly in a healthcare setting. And have you ever thought of spending time engaged in real-life situations where doctors and patients are having to break bad news and communicate stressful sort of events? Because I think engaging and actually seeing what people do in that environment in relation to touch particularly, and then to contact that occurs, that really makes an empathetic encounter valuable. I'm not sure if that's any route that you've ever considered looking at.
I'd love to do that. I'm not sure what the ethics are surrounding it, but I'd love to do that. It's a good idea. Thank you.
Because it's a very real-world thing that we do as healthcare workers in just about everything we do. Break bad news at different levels, sometimes very major things, sometimes just simple things that it's trying to get that meaning through to the person. And touch, to me in my mind, is something that you've really, touch and colour, warmth, all those sort of things, very, very important.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Arno, and thank you very much, Katy. Now, I realise we're coming to the end of our time. This has been the fastest, fullest, most exciting QI Connect ever. Really, the brains that you and the minds that you've exposed us to in this 1 hour have been tremendous. Tim, could I ask you for just a final comment around what you've been hearing over the past hour?
Well, it's just delightful and exciting to see this level of design being applied to healthcare in Scotland. As I think, as somebody mentioned earlier, it may be a small population, but that gives tremendous opportunity to make change happen, perhaps a little bit more quickly and more directly connect it to real people. So it's so exciting to see this movement going on, exciting to see all this work going on, and I look forward to seeing the results beginning to kind of ripple out to the rest of us that are a little bit further away. But thank you for including me.
Thank you very much, Tim, and thanks to all of our presenters and all of our panelists. What a wonderful session. It's all recorded, all of the chat box, all of the links will be sent out. A big thank you to our presenters. Not only do you get a copy of Tim's wonderful book, Change by Design, but you also get the much coveted QI Connect mug that will be winging its way to you. And just to remind everyone that our 2017 sessions in QI Connect start off with the amazing Chris Ham. Chris will be speaking to us on the 26th of January, and you have the time there. We'll make sure that's sent out on the Twitter at hashtag HISQI Connect. And look at the amazing lineup that we're populating for 2017. So we'll send out that lineup with all of the materials after this call. But just remains for me to say thank you to all of the QI Connectors. Thanks to the small but perfectly formed QI Connect team. And good night. And thank you all very much.